In the space of the last 5 years, or even over the last 12 months, how many of us have experienced or know someone who's been caught in a flood, a hurricane, a drought condition, or a forest fire? And that's even before I mentioned the 2020 massive global pandemic. This poses a real and deeply dangerous threat. And when it comes to creation care and biodiversity conservation, I come across people of faith who come up with excuses as to why biodiversity isn't important. The church needs to teach from the front about all of these things and not focus on just people and just climate change.
I think the biggest takeaway is that I'm not alone in this journey. Like, there's a big global community of Christian people out there doing their part in their part of the world.
The COVID crisis forced us to be creative. We ended up doing a Zoom conference like everyone else in the world. I think the power in this convening was in the breadth of people that we had come together. We had scientists and faith leaders, we had young, we had old, we had people from America, from Europe, from Asia, from Africa. All of those people coming together and developing relationships. That is the foundation that we're laying for the future.
Biologists in the making, let's put it that way, to visit Genesis and think about the creation and think about the detail and the care that has been put into this planet. For me, has always been very God related. He is in this.
I began working with faith leaders in 2008. Fast forward 12 years later, I now run a program called the LOCA Initiative at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it's a outreach and capacity building program for faith leaders and indigenous leaders who work on environmental and climate issues. Our common friend Catherine Hayhoe, who is a well-known climate scientist and an evangelical, came to Madison, Wisconsin in 2019, and she introduced Ed and me, and we ended up having a series of conversations around what could emerge out of a partnership from the creation care movement, with Ed as one of the leaders, and then with the LOCA initiative supporting that work. And we discovered that all three of us really believe in the power of dialogue and the power of normalizing climate and environmental issues.
Having conversations with people is not only the most important thing we can do to raise awareness about how important climate change is, how it affects our lives, and what we can do to fix it, but having these conversations actually helps us because we hear from other people what they're doing, and that gives us hope too.
I've been a pastor for many years and also a director of a Christian environmental organization called Care of Creation. I'm convinced that caring for God's creation, caring for the planet, is absolutely integral to what it means to be a Christian.
I think science provides the facts and figures, but it doesn't always meet people where they are. And I think what faith traditions can bring is a moral imperative and urgency to environmental and climate issues, and make environmental and climate issues relevant at an individual, a community, and therefore at a planetary level.
Science can tell us, for example, in the case of climate change, that it is changing. Humans really are responsible. The impacts are serious, and our future is in our hands. But science can't tell us what to do. What's the right thing to do? The answer to that does not come from science. The answer comes from our hearts. And for many of us, what's in our hearts is informed by our faith.
Over 80% of the human population subscribes to a faith, and they turn to their faith leaders for hope and inspiration. What I've learned working with faith leaders like Reverend Ambrose Carroll, who leads a lot of climate resilience and community resilience work for the Black church community in the US and globally, is that we cannot take on environmental and climate issues without centering the community at the heart of it.
We approach the world as if there is not enough. Faith leads me to believe that there is enough for everyone, and that as marvelous as the design of the human body is also the design of the planet, that nothing is happenstance, that every life is given for a purpose, and that it is in the minds and the hearts of those who live is the answer, I believe, to every need and every desire.
One of the reasons I do what I do is because of my concern for the future and the younger generation. And one of the people that we have worked with who really exemplifies that is Kyle and the Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, who are doing a wonderful job at reaching the youth.
The message that I want my faith community to gather around is that climate action is deeply Christian. That climate action is just part of what it means to follow Jesus in the 21st century. The entire law and all the prophets, all of it hinges on these two commands I give you: love God and love your neighbor. When we look at how climate change is impacting God's world, a world that God calls good and takes delight in and calls us to care for it, addressing climate change is a way for us to love God better by loving God's world, just like he tells us to.
The answer for climate change, the answer is justice. The answer is environmental justice. The Bible says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray and seek God's face, that God has the potential to heal our land.